Start. Right. So yesterday we were discussing about diuretics specifically. I talked to you about loop diuretics. Today I'll go a little bit more specific about loop diuretics. So we'll discuss about furosemide. Now that you already know the mechanism of action of how a loop diuretic works, furosemide. Okay. Just to recall what as to what you can repeat what we said yesterday. Loop diuretics such as furosemide, torsemide, and all of those, they will block sodium potassium to chloride symporter, because of which the amount of sodium and chloride being excreted in your urine will increase, and wherever sodium is there, water will follow, because of which diuresis occurs. That is the basic mechanism. Okay. So coming to the effects of loop diuretics is that, other than just causing increase in water volume or urine volume, specifically, loop diuretics can also cause excretion of potassium, calcium, and magnesium. But the thing is that calcium can be reabsorbed back in the distal tube, so hypocalcemia will not occur. But the potassium levels and magnesium levels will definitely decrease in patients who are being given furosemide. Other than that, they will increase reabsorption of uric acid. That is why I told you they mess with uric acid reabsorption, and they mess with uric acid transport. Whenever urine is being formed, uric acid is a component in your body that is thrown out into your urine. When you give furosemide in a patient, uric acid levels in them will significantly increase, and especially if that patient has gout, let's suppose, in those patients, giving furosemide can lead to gouty attacks. So they'll have severe inflammation of their big toe, and specifically increase in uric acid levels. So avoid giving it in people with gout. Another thing is that long-term usage of loop diuretics will cause, see, as such, loop diuretics will cause a little bit of vasodilation, renal vasculature mein. But if you use it for a long period of time, what will happen is it will cause decreased fluid and electrolyte reabsorption, especially in PCT, okay, which in turn can trigger renin to be released. That will lead to increased water retention, which is counterproductive, which you do not want. If you use furosemide for a long period of time, renin might be released, and RAS, renin angiotensin aldosterone system, might kick in. So you do not want to do that. Now, as such, furosemide is very helpful in case of congestive heart failure as well, because it will decrease ventricular filling. Now, congestive heart failure mein kya hota? To put it in a summarized way, let's suppose this is your heart. Okay, 1 second. Let's suppose this is your heart, and congestive heart failure is a condition in which your heart is not beating properly. Specifically, the ventricles are not undergoing systole properly, and fluid is accumulating inside your ventricles, especially your left ventricle. What happens because of this is, left ventricle and right ventricle, both of them will have fluid being accumulated inside them. Okay, what happens because of this is, pressure starts building up uh, in the back channel, in the sense that pressure will increase initially in the atria. Okay, initially ventricles may, because it is not able to pump the blood out into your pulmonary artery and into your vertical aorta, fluid will start, or blood specifically will start collecting in your heart or in your ventricles. This is CHF, okay, coronary heart failure or congestive heart failure. यहाँ पर प्रेशर इंक्रीज होने की वजह से अल्टीमेटली एट्रिया में प्रेशर इंक्रीज होता. So the pressure keeps on going back. Once atria, the pressure in atria increases, this causes a backflow. Now you know that oxygenated blood is coming to your left ventricle. That oxygenated blood is coming from your lung. So यहाँ से आपको the connection that is going to your lung. So let's suppose I draw your lungs like this. Okay. From here you know that one is supplying deoxygenated blood, and from your lungs you are getting oxygenated blood. So let's suppose this is deoxygenated blood which is going to your lungs, and there is oxygenated blood that is coming out of your lungs. Okay, because pressure starts building up, what will happen is the blood vessels in your uh, lungs will have increased pressure in them. That is called pulmonary hypertension. The amount of blood pressure in your lungs, or the capillaries that are present in your lungs, they will have hypertension in them. Whenever such type of hypertension occurs, what will happen is, let's suppose ये एक blood vessel है inside your lung. ठीक है. Increased pressure will cause water to seep out. ठीक है. Fluid will start seeping out of these blood vessels, because of which fluid will start accumulating into your lungs and you will have pulmonary edema. That is the pulmonary edema. You will also see pulmonary effusion sometimes. That is also called pulmonary effusion. That is a big problem. Okay, you will not be able to breathe properly. That is one of the reasons why furosemide is given. If you are able to give furosemide, let's suppose periphery में ही आप you are increasing the amount of fluid that is lost, the amount of fluid that is collecting in your ventricles will decrease, because of which pressure that is building up here will decrease, because of which pulmonary edema will decrease. Okay, so if you can follow along, I hope you followed along. What is happening here is, in congestive heart failure, because blood is accumulating in your ventricles, pressure starts building up. Once pressure starts building up, it will affect your pressure in your atria, ultimately affecting what do you call, the pressure in your pulmonary veins, which are carrying oxygenated blood. This pressure will have a backflow effect, wherein it will start affecting your lungs as well, and the capillaries in your lungs, the blood capillaries in your lungs, they will have hypertension. Okay, pressure building up in those capillaries will lead to hypertension. In the effect of that hypertension, the capillaries of your lungs generally tend to lose water, or what they do is they will decrease the volume of their blood. The volume of blood will, or the water from your blood will start seeping out because of the excessive amount of pressure, because of which edema will start building up around your lung, in your lung and around your lung. Okay, that is pulmonary edema. To treat that, you can give furosemide, which will ultimately cause fluid to move out of your body and decrease the ventricular filling. Because ventricular filling will decrease, this pressure will also decrease, and ultimately edema can be treated. Okay, I hope you understood the logic behind this now. Coming to pharmacokinetics, ये समझ में आया तुम लोगों को, or do you want me to explain again? Okay, so coming to PK of this furosemide, pharmacokinetics, this drug is rapidly absorbed orally. One second, right? PK, rapid oral absorption. It is highly protein bound, highly plasma protein bound. Other than that, this drug will get excreted through your, it will get metabolized by your liver and excreted through kidneys. Metabolized by liver and excreted through kidneys. Okay, though its T half is very small, the half life is around 1.5 hours, but it will work for 4 to 6 hours. If you are giving a IV dose, or if you are giving IV of furosemide, it will start working within 2 to 5 minutes. If you give a oral dose, let's suppose you give a tablet, it will work within 20 to 40 minutes. So if you have an emergency condition where you want to decrease blood pressure of the patient immediately, it is preferable that you use IV. It will start working very quickly. Okay, if you use oral dose, if you use an oral medication, the dose will be around 20 to 80 mg per day. Okay, don't go over 80 mg once a day. Especially if you give it in the morning, it is good. You will get Lasix 40 mg. If you are giving IV, then you can give a 20 mg per ml injection. 20 mg per ml injection. Okay, you'll get vials of this furosemide which you can inject. Now, some specific adverse effects I told you yesterday, this fellow can cause hyponatremia, the amount of sodium, because it is blocking sodium transport, hyponatremia will occur. Patient will have dehydration because quick hypovolemia will occur, quick amount of diuresis will occur. This can lead to shock as well as what you call arrhythmias in some patients. It can cause ototoxicity, it can cause hyperuricemia, especially hyperuricemia is bad in patients with gout, because increased uric acid will cause gouty attacks, and it can also cause hyperglycemia as well as hyperlipidemia. So those are some of the adverse effects of your furosemide or loop diuretics in general. Now coming to the next class of drugs, which are thiazide diuretics. Thiazide diuretics will they will act on your distal tube. Okay, they'll specifically act on the early distal convoluted tubule, and they will block sodium chlorine co-transport. So if I take a look at the cell of your DCT, distal convoluted tubule, let's suppose this is one of the interstitial cells of your DCT. In your DCT, let's suppose this is lumen, which has urine, okay, where urine is being formed, and this is the side of blood. Okay, now in your cells here towards the urine side, you will have a particular protein which is called a sodium chlorine co-transporter. So what it does is, this fellow will transport sodium and chlorine together. ठीक है, उसको सोडियम क्लोरीन को ट्रांसपोर्टर बोलते हैं, because it is what you call, it is also called sodium chlorine symporter for that matter. It is transporting both of them together. What thiazide diuretics will do is, they will block this fellow, they will block this protein. Whenever thiazide diuretics end up blocking this protein, what ends up happening is sodium levels in your urine will increase. Whenever sodium levels in urine increases, along with it water will also increase. Basically what happens is water will not be reabsorbed back inside. Think of it this way, osmosis may, whenever there is a higher, wherever higher concentration is present, that is where water will go. Here the same thing applies. Because sodium is being retained in your urine, the concentration of your urine will increase. To compensate that, water volume in your urine will also increase. Or to put it another way, if normally without the presence of thiazide diuretics, if sodium was going in, ultimately water will also go in. But now what happens is, when you use thiazide diuretics, when you are blocking the function of this protein, sodium levels in your urine increases, because of which water levels will remain the same, in the sense that they will not be reabsorbed back inside, meaning total amount of urine that is being excreted, that will increase. Okay, I hope you are following along the logic here. Okay, they have moderate efficacy, they are not really that good of diuretics, but they have moderate efficacy as almost 90%. Now what happens is, even though you are what do you call, blocking sodium here, most of the sodium will be reabsorbed up to this point, meaning if you take your glomerulus and यहाँ से आपका PCT आया, यहाँ से आपका loop of Henle and ascending tube, and here is your DCT, right? This is where thiazide diuretics are working. Okay, if you can follow along, this is where your thiazide diuretics are working. Here they are specifically blocking sodium, but the point is, in all of this location from here to here, maximum amount of sodium that is present in your urine will be reabsorbed. That is why they have a very moderate function. Okay, they will only affect diuresis slightly, they will not cause severe diuresis, and they are like moderate drugs. Okay, because most of the sodium that is present in your urine will be reabsorbed before it is reaching DCT. Whatever little amount that does reach DCT will be blocked by thiazide diuretics. So a small percentage, 10% of total amount of sodium that is present in your urine will be blocked here. Its reabsorption will be blocked here. Rest of it is already absorbed previously. So in your loop of Henle में उतना नहीं होता, thick tube में होता, and PCT में होता. So those two locations are prime locations for sodium reabsorption. There 90% of sodium reabsorption will occur. By the by the time it reaches DCT, only 10% of sodium is left to be reabsorbed, which you are blocking using thiazide diuretics. Okay, समझ में आया? Did you guys understand? Okay, feel free to ask me doubts if you're having any doubts. Now coming to specific pharmacokinetics of these thiazides, you have two main type of thiazide drugs. Okay, thiazide diuretics. Those include hydrochlorothiazide and chlorothiazide. You will have a few more drugs, but they are not pure thiazide derivatives. That's why I'm not mentioning them. They'll work in the same way. One is like metalazone. Metalazone will also be a thiazide. It will be included in this thiazide diuretics, but they do not have a pure thiazide ring in it. That is why they are not true thiazide diuretics. In any way, coming to pharmacokinetics of these drugs, They are very well absorbed orally, and they act very very quickly. Duration of action varies. So depending on different type of thiazide, you will have duration action of from 6 hours to 48 hours. Okay, for example, you have a drug called polythiazide which will work, whose duration of action is 1 to 2 days. It will work for 24 hours, from 24 hours to 48 hours, whereas hydrochlorothiazide will work from 8 to 12 hours. Okay, depending on different type of thiazide, you will get different duration of action. So well absorbed orally, and duration of action varies between 6 to 48 hours. Okay. Some drugs having lesser, some drugs having much more duration of action. They are primarily excreted by your kidney. Excreted by kidney. Okay. Coming to adverse effects of hydrochlorothiazide, these drugs can cause hypokalemia. They will increase potassium excretion out of your this thing, out of your body, and basically they will increase potassium levels in your urine, because of which the amount of potassium that is present in your blood will significantly decrease. All right. So they can cause hypokalemia, they can cause hypercalcemia. Hypercalcemia, calcium levels increases. They will cause hyperuricemia. So these are also very bad in patients who have gout. Okay, because they are increasing the amount of uric acid levels in the body. It can cause metabolic alkalosis, and it can cause hyponatremia. Okay, because sodium levels will slightly decrease. Now, in some patients, especially those with diabetes mellitus, hyperglycemia is very profound with thiazide diuretics. As such, thiazide diuretics will cause some hyperglycemia, but if you give it in patients who already have diabetes mellitus, it can be even more bad. Especially in some patients, it might actually cause diabetes mellitus because of insulin inhibition. Okay? Especially those who have been using thiazides for a very very long time. Imagine there is a patient who is a chronic user of thiazide diuretics. There is a very high chance that that patient will develop diabetes mellitus, because thiazide diuretics can cause insulin inhibition. They will alter the function of insulin receptors, and they can lead to diabetes mellitus. So they can also cause hyperglycemia and alter insulin receptor activity. ठीक है? May lead to diabetes mellitus on upon chronic usage. Chronic usage meaning a few years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Okay, that is when it will cause such problems. Sometimes because of what do you call imbalance in electrolytes, it can also lead to weakness, fatigue, and anorexia in some patients. Sometimes even gastrointestinal problems, slight discomfort in gastrointestinal system. So that is about thiazide diuretics. I hope you understood that. Now coming to the next class, potassium sparing diuretics. These are called potassium sparing diuretics because इससे पहले the two classes that we came across, loop diuretics and thiazides, both of them were causing hypokalemia. Basically they were decreasing the potassium levels in your blood or in your body. These will do exactly opposite. Potassium sparing diuretics will cause hyperkalemia, or they will basically not cause any excretion of potassium in your urine. There are two ways through which potassium sparing diuretics work. Okay, so those two ways, one way is that they directly act as aldosterone antagonist. Okay, aldosterone is a particular hormone that can cause sodium and water retention. It is a part of renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. If you remember, whenever there is hypovolemia or whenever there is renin release, even in case of stress, aldosterone will be released, and because of which sodium and water will be reabsorbed. Whenever you give certain types of potassium sparing diuretics, especially something like spironolactone and eplerenone. ठीक है, both of these will directly antagonize aldosterone. They will inhibit the enzyme aldosterone, or specifically they will inhibit or they will block the receptor on which aldosterone is working. Normally aldosterone causes sodium and water retention, so if you are blocking the function of aldosterone, it will cause diuresis without affecting potassium levels. Okay, that is one way. Then the other way is they will directly inhibit ion channels in DCT. So they will inhibit ion channels in DCT, sodium channels specifically, because of which what ends up happening is whenever sodium channels starts getting blocked, especially in DCT and collecting tubule, the amount of fluid that is present in your urine will increase. Think of it this way: if sodium is not coming inside your cell, water will also not come inside, because the concentration of sodium, or the total concentration of urine has increased. Water will remain there so that osmotic pressure is maintained. So it also means that along with sodium, water will also be thrown out of your body. Specific drugs that will come in this class is amyloid. Okay, you have a few more, but this is enough. Now, spironolactone specifically, as I told you, this fellow will bind with aldosterone receptors and it will inhibit the action of what do you call inhibit the action of aldosterone, because of which sodium and water excretion increases, but it decreases potassium excretion. So one risk of aldosterone antagonist, something like spironolactone, is that it can cause hyperkalemia. Hyperkalemia can also lead to conduction problems. It can cause arrhythmias in certain patients. So you have to be careful with that. Whenever you are messing up, see, most of the diuretics, they will affect electrolytes in one way or the other, except osmotic diuretics, because of which what technically osmotic diuretics will also cause electrolyte balance. So in a way, all diuretics will cause electrolyte imbalance, or they will alter the levels of electrolytes in your body, which can affect your cardiac health in a way, especially if you are using one type of diuretic for a very very long period of time. If possible, keep switching diuretics, or if possible, completely switch to a different class of antihypertensive. If you are giving it for hypertension, that is, you can switch to a completely different hypertensive, which will be better for the patient in the long run. Okay, so it also enhances calcium excretion by direct action on renal tubules, spironolactone, because of which the patient will have hypocalcemia. Okay, so coming to adverse effects of both of these, adverse effects of medical your potassium sparing diuretics will obviously be hypercalcemia, hyperkalemia, and hypocalcemia. Okay, later on, if hyperkalemia becomes very very rampant, where it is creating serious imbalance, that is when the patient will have drowsiness. They can also have drowsiness. Some CNS symptoms will start showing. Drowsiness hota, metabolic acidosis hota. Some patients will have skin rashes. Some patients will have what you call gastrointestinal disturbances. All of that will occur. Yeah, GIT disturbances and metabolic acidosis. Okay, so these are side effects of your potassium sparing diuretics. Now coming to, see, you can use these potassium sparing diuretics, you can use them in edema, you can use them with other diuretics, like you can use them with thiazide or loop diuretics to decrease sodium potassium loss, or you can use them in hypertension. You can use them in a condition like aldosteronism. Aldosteronism is a condition in which the patient will have extremely high amounts of aldosterone in their body. In that case, they will retain a lot of water and sodium. So in such cases, if you are giving potassium sparing diuretics, especially spironolactone, it will be very very helpful. Okay, now coming to the next class, carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Your primary carbonic anhydrase inhibitors will be acetazolamide. Okay, You have acetazolamide, methazolamide. There are a few more, but acetazolamide will remain the same, the main one. Now, acetazolamide क्या करता? अच्छा, before we get into what is carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, you have to remember what is carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic anhydrase is a particular enzyme which will convert bicarbonate or carbonic acid. Let me put it this way. It will convert this into water and carbon dioxide. This is what carbonic anhydrase will do. Okay. What is the significance of this water and carbon dioxide? See, this process of conversion of water, carbonic, what do you call, carbonic acid to water and carbon dioxide will occur in urine, and this in turn will be reabsorbed back into your interstitial cell, or it will be reabsorbed back into your body. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, this is occurring in urine. Okay, so if I put it in a cellular way, let's suppose ऐसा है, H2CO3 which is present in your urine will get converted using carbonic anhydrase into water and carbon dioxide. At different locations, both carbon dioxide and water will get reabsorbed back into your body. So basically, in normal, what do you call it, normal constitution, water is getting back inside. If you are able to give a drug that is inhibiting this carbonic anhydrase, okay, let's suppose I'm inhibiting this carbonic anhydrase, carbonic acid will never be converted into water and what do you call, carbon dioxide. Right, अगर enzyme ही नहीं है, if you do not have carbonic anhydrase enzyme, you cannot convert carbonic acid H2CO3 into water and carbon dioxide. If they are converted into water and carbon dioxide, later on they'll be reabsorbed back inside the body. If you are able to stop this enzyme itself, urine will still have only carbonic acid. Carbonic acid will get excreted as is. Okay, generally what happens with carbonic acid is, carbonic acid, whenever it is present in urine for a long period of time, it will dissociate into hydrogen ions and HCO3. Okay, this HCO3 bicarbonate ion will mix with sodium to form sodium bicarbonate. Okay, this sodium bicarbonate will get excreted out of your urine without getting reabsorption at all. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitors will also block the reabsorption of sodium bicarbonate, because of which water will water is basically getting excreted out of your body in a different form. ठीक है, यहाँ पर H2CO3 के फॉर्म में है, but in any case you are losing water, right? Ultimately causing diuresis. That is one very important use of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Okay, I'll repeat once again just in case you did not get it. यहाँ पर normally in your urine what happens is, carbonic acid, that is, so in your cells what will happen is, carbon dioxide will combine with water and it will form carbonic acid, which is which will what do you call, will, in the presence of carbonic acid it will form carbonic acid, carbonic acid. Okay, this carbonic acid in your urine within the presence of an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase can get dissociated into water and carbon dioxide. Now water and carbon dioxide individually will get reabsorbed back into your body at different locations in your nephron. Okay, both carbon dioxide will go inside and water will get reabsorbed back inside to make sure that you have enough amount of bicarbonate buffer. Okay, your blood also needs a bicarbonate buffer that is present in your what you call serum. ये maintain करने के लिए you need carbon dioxide back into your body. Now, if I'm able to block this, let's suppose I'm blocking this carbonic anhydrase, you're essentially blocking the process in which carbonic acid is converting into water and carbon dioxide. In another, to put it in another way, you are stopping water from getting inside. Okay? And another thing that happens is, if carbonic acid remains as is, it will dissociate into water and bicarbonate ion. This bicarbonate ion will mix with sodium ions that are present in your urine and they will form sodium bicarbonate. Okay? NaHCO3. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitors will also block the reabsorption of this, meaning in both the ways it is stopping water from getting inside your body, ultimately causing diuresis. ठीक है, I hope you understood the mechanism behind it here. Now, coming to adverse effects of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. See, they will not just act on your kidneys, they will also act on your eye. So, if you want to decrease aqueous humor, that will be very helpful. The carbonic anhydrase inhibitors can be given, or if the patient has having excessive amount of CSF formation can be decreased by giving a carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. It will be helpful in multiple locations. Coming to adverse effects of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, this fellow will cause metabolic acidosis. Okay. Whenever you have bicarbonate loss, continuous bicarbonate loss, the total pH in your blood will decrease, leading to metabolic acidosis. It can cause renal stones because calcium is lost and bicarbonate, because of which you will have renal stones. It can cause hypercalciuria, increased calcium in your urine. It can cause hypokalemia. It can lead to drowsiness, and it can lead to what you call motion sickness, mountain sickness, sorry. So rapid, if someone is on what you call carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, what will happen is whenever they are climbing some mountain or something like that, what will happen is pulmonary edema can occur in such patients. Okay. In such patients, it is better to avoid carbonic anhydrase inhibitors if you are planning to if they are planning to hike or something like that. Okay, so those are the adverse effects of your carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Coming to the last class, osmotic diuretics. Osmotic diuretics are very, very simple. They will basically increase the osmolarity of your urine. Now let's suppose मेरे पास दो solutions है, or let's suppose I have osmosis and यहाँ पर I have two sides. This has few solutes. This has more number of solutes. And let's suppose this is the fluid. Okay, this is water. Where do you think water will go? Let's suppose we have location A and location B. Okay. Where will water go? Will it move from B to A or A to B? Concentration of A is more, concentration of B is less. Where will water move? Think and tell me.
B, sir.
It will move to B. कैसा? यहाँ पर concentration is low. Solute concentration is low. यहाँ पर solute concentration is high. तो A से B को मूव होता, B से A को मूव होता. This is the basic
From
principle
B
of
to A.
osmosis. B to A. Okay. How many of you agree with that? It will move from B to A बोल के? B to A. Yes, it will move from B to A because यहाँ पर A में the amount of water that is present in low, it has lower concentration of water but higher concentration of solute. Whereas B has higher concentration of water and lower concentration of solute. Water tends to move from its higher concentration area to its lower concentration area. यहाँ पर this is basically urine and this is your body or your cell. ठीक है? What we are doing with osmotic diuretics like mannitol is that it will not affect electrolytes at all. It will not carry over. It will cause electrolyte balance because what will happen is only water will move this side. Sodium and all will not move this side, because of which the patient will have hypernatremia. Okay? The amount of sodium that should have excreted along with water, that will not go, only water will go. Mannitol will basically increase the concentration of solute in your urine, because of which a lot of water which is present in your cells and which is present in your blood will rush out into your urine, increasing diuresis. That is the mechanism of action of osmotic diuretics. Okay, it causes water retention in both PCT and descending loop of Henle, because of which water diuresis increases, and there will be some sodium loss but not significant. On the contrary, sodium actually increases slightly. Specifically, this fellow will not be helpful if a patient is having edema like condition, because edema, like in patients with edema, they generally have a lot of sodium in their body as well. So it is important that you excrete sodium. If you are giving mannitol in such patients, it is useless. You can use it, however, in conditions where the patient has increased what you call intracranial pressure is high, or if you want to what you call increase urination in ARF patients. If someone has acute renal failure and they are not able to urinate properly, in such patients, mannitol is very helpful. Okay, so with this, we have completed our diuretics. I hope you